Good evening, everybody. My name is Brad Smith, and on behalf of the Amos Fortune Forum, I want to welcome all of you to the first of our summer series of the 77th year that the Amos Fortune Forum has been going on in this meeting house. It's an honor to meet in a building like this and to be part of the cadence of events that take place around July 4th in the meeting house and around Jaffrey. We will be meeting here every Friday night starting at 8 o'clock through August 16th. If you want to find out more about our speaker tonight and the speakers who are coming up over the next 6 weeks, you can go to our brand new website that we're very proud of. It's amosfortune.org, which is a little different from the .com that we used to have. And you can find out all about the speakers, about the forum. We'll even give you an opportunity to donate money if you'd like. I know it's warm in here, and we want to get to the main event. I know I want to get to the main event. But just a few housekeeping items, and in particular some thank yous. First of all, to Ellen Widmer, who hosted our speaker and his family tonight and sponsored the beautiful flowers from Calls. So please join me in thanking Ellen. Also want to thank Betsy Trimble, who has selflessly agreed to organize all of the receptions that we have. Everyone is invited right after the end of the presentation tonight to go next door. Just follow the lighted path over there for some nice cold refreshments, to meet with Rob and his family and friends and ask the questions maybe that you didn't have an opportunity to ask. And she and Jenda Trimble are working hard at putting that together tonight and overseeing it for all the summer, so we thank them too. We'd certainly like to thank all of our business sponsors and the many, many individuals who have contributed to the forum. As you know, it is free and it is open to everyone, and we want to keep it that way. Our commitment is to keep it that way. There are many ways for you to contribute. On your way out tonight, you can leave something in the begging bowls. You can contribute online. There are some cards that we've left and the benches. Take it with you. There's a QR code that will take you right to the website, give you all the information you need to follow up if you so desire. We normally have some chairs outside in the back if you'd like to come early and have a picnic. The weather was a little iffy tonight, so we didn't set it up, but normally we do, and you're always welcome to come early, bring some food, and enjoy the beautiful square here. And we also record each of these sessions, and within 24 hours or so, we should have it posted on YouTube. So if you have family or friends who either couldn't make it here tonight or who live outside the region, please let them know that they'll be able to watch this at their leisure. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Rob Hannings. The columnist George Will once remarked, "Baseball, it is said, is only a game. True, and the Grand Canyon is only a hole in Arizona." I'm convinced that our speaker tonight would heartily agree. Rob has baseball coursing through his veins. Mention the word baseball and you need only sit back as he takes off with stories, as I'm sure we'll hear a few tonight, about his own days on the diamond, about local lore and legends, and so on. His passion soaks through every recollection, every mitt he's repaired, every mile he's traveled to either play, watch, or talk about the great game of baseball. As you can see, Rob has brought his collection of memorabilia. To these They're not dusty relics that should sit quietly behind glass in a museum, but rather reflections of the collective experience most all Americans share. Whether it's playing ball or watching a Little League game or remembering fondly how your grandmother never missed a Sox game on the radio, baseball is embedded in the American psyche. You don't need to be a fan to appreciate its deeper meaning. Jim Bouton was known in high school as warm-up Bouton because he rarely got to play in high school. But he persevered. He taught himself how to throw a variety of pitches, including a knuckleball. He played in the majors for nearly 20 years in the 60s and the 70s. He once said, "You spend a good piece of your life gripping a baseball, and in the end it turns out that it was the other way around all the time." I suspect Rob would not disagree. Rob was a player and an All-American in the 1980s. He has one of the finest collections of baseball memorabilia, particularly for this region in the world, including a lot of local artifacts, as I said. He's presented his wealth of knowledge from local groups to college classrooms to TV specials. As a catcher, he's caught one of the greatest and most feared pitchers of the modern era. And despite being a Yankees fan, he's a gem of a human being. It's my distinct pleasure now to welcome Rob Hannings to take a big lead on first and share some of that love and passion he has for the great game of baseball. Please.
Thank you very much. We had not talked earlier about Jim Bouton, Yankee pitcher, but I actually caught Jim Bouton in Ridgewood, New Jersey, for a team called the Ridgewood Paramus Barons, and he used to knock his hat off on every single pitch, and he threw a palm ball. Well, let's get going on this. I digress, as I've been known to do. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me, and welcome to my slightly bizarre world of baseball. I'm Rob Hannings. I live in Greenfield, New Hampshire, with my wife, Valley. My daughter, Stacy, and her fiancé, Eric, live in Peterborough, and thank goodness for their help in this presentation, PowerPoint, etc. For 23 years plus, I've been the electrician at Franklin Pierce University, the basketball game announcer for both men's and women's basketball, and I've relaced all the softball and baseball mitts, not just for them, but for virtually every school in the region, including the Keene Swamp Bats. So I wanted to start on this first slide. I know you all grimaced when I said I'm a Yankee fan, but my dad was an oil painter, and he actually painted this 7-foot by 5-foot mural of Yankee Stadium on one of my spare bedrooms in my house. It's a treasure for sure. Also, 2024 marks my 50th anniversary in this Monadnock area. I've played on many teams, I've had many teammates, and a lot of them are here tonight, thank goodness. Some friendly faces, and a lot of memories. We haven't come up with our hand signals yet to flip a slide here. Some of my teammates get a different signal. I don't know what they're going to, you may get something from me here, but what most of my collection is a traveling history of a time when there was not a lot of recreation or social events. Most of daily life consisted of work in a factory or in a farm or in a trade. Church functions or various agricultural events, even some military functions were the major social gatherings. It was baseball that changed all of that. In New England and in this area particularly, when the soldiers returned home from the Civil War, to rural America, they brought with them baseball. It was the rage. Every small team, and large team for that matter, in the area boasted a team. This first slide of town teams here has an interesting group of characters. That the top left is a team from Winchester, the Thompson Nine. There are 9 brothers on that team. Greenfield, Peterborough, Antrim, Marlow, Goffstown. Now the Goffstown team, The second from left is a local legend here, Roland Beaver Jutras, who was the rec director in Peterborough for many, many years, played on a very good traveling team as well. Winchester, and there's a fella on the bottom right-hand side, second in. His name is James Red Kibbe, and I'll get back to him in a minute. Team of Unity as well. Also the town of Temple, which is the town that I moved into, so some of these old geezers were some of my first friends in the town of Temple. The Temple store, still run by Peggy Willard, son of Mervyn Willard, who's in that picture. New Ipswich, as well as Walpole. Okay. One of the earliest games I could find in the Peterborough transcript, on August 12th of 1870, at the Eagle Grounds, just south of Putnam Park, in Peterborough, the Peterborough Eagles met the New Ipswich Eurekas. New Ipswich came up with 9 runs in the 10th inning to win 53-48. That was 101 runs with only 1 home run in the game. After the game, they were all led down to the townhouse in Peterborough and were fed a lavish meal, they said, by the Ladies' Aid Society. Some of the home teams had some home field advantages as well. For example, in Temple in 1880, at Arthur Burton's Field, the site of their first organized game in 1880, pitcher Alvin Holt had to throw at almost a 30-degree angle uphill. But my favorite passage was from their town history, a very well-written town history, was how this was in 1900, excuse me, at the Lithia Springs ball field, which is right across the street from Ben's Sugar Shack. Minister Jonathan Cragen wrote in that town history how he came to deplore the common practice of playing baseball in cow pastures after he had slipped and fallen on what he believed was third base. In the town history, imagine that. Hancock had a road that separated the outfield from the infield. A ground ball up the middle, the center fielder had to look both ways to make the play. Antrim had a row of birch trees that would, in right field, and the ball would bounce around like a pinball game in right field. Also in that same right field, the field fell off, losing sight of player and ball. So the umpire had to beeline out there to see what was going on down there. Some of the contests were not so civil. Now, I want to point out a couple of uniforms here, too. The Antrim uniform up there is one of them. They're involved in this ruckus right here. Some of the contests were not so civil. In 1916, the Antrim history writes, instantaneous hate reached its greatest intensity only during games against Hillsborough. Why this is so is inexplicable. Because Hillsborough is the focal point for special Saturday night safaris, at which time good fellowship and romance reigned supreme. The animosity reached a boiling point in this one particular game when both teams charged home plate armed with stray bats, and Police Chief Granville Whitney charged into the middle of this potential melee, pulled his revolver, fired a shot in the air, and drove both teams back to their respective benches. Also rivals, and I certainly don't have to tell this crowd this, between Jaffrey and Peterborough. I was friendly with the former publisher of the Peterborough Transcript, Paul Cummings, who told me this story. In the late 30s, the Peterborough Athletic Association, of which there are a couple of variations up there, would come to Jaffrey. What do we got here? Let's see. I jumped ahead here. Sorry, Stace. Peterborough could not beat Jaffrey. Jaffrey would beat him 7-6, 4-3, 2-1. Okay, next slide, Stace. Until they got the idea to pay this fella from Keene, a hired gun as you would call him. His name was James Red Kibbe. He had pitched in the Washington organization, was not only a great hitter but a great pitcher. Peterborough came up with $10 a game to pitch for Peterborough against Jaffrey. It worked. The tides were turned. Peterborough would win by the same reversed scores. And that was a fair amount of money in those days. Well, they just could not come up with money for that particular weekend's doubleheader. They agreed, oh, well, let's just get Donald Brown to pitch this weekend, see how we fare. So they all loaded up in cars, and there was even a train that went from Peterborough to Jaffrey, and they all unloaded. And pitching for Jaffrey for $12 was James Red Kibbe. So Jaffrey still does not like to lose. Next one. This well-dressed bunch of locals, pleated pants, straw hats, bow ties, they are the 1904 Jaffrey Browns. My research tells me that they were a pretty good team. They would travel by train all over the area and into Massachusetts. Now keep in mind, across the border into Winchendon, they had a great team, including some great players. They had a player who played in the same outfield with Babe Ruth, Walter Whitey Witt. So there were some great players locally here too. So this team would travel all over, and as well as being employed by hotels in the area. For example, the Halfway House would pay for their services to play baseball for the guests of the hotel. I want to bring your attention to this tall fella, center back row. Sorry, family. He's got a good set of ears on him. His relatives are here, so I have to be careful about picking on him. That is Fred Hunt. The bat boy is his son Leon. Next picture. There's a newer version of that. Here's a 1910 version. Fred is in the front row this time with Leon, the bat boy. So I put this together just because of the lineage that goes. It runs deep in this town, and it's a proud athletic area, and they hold it dear to their hearts. The next one is an all-star team, of which I am in as well, but in that center middle is a teammate of mine playing for the D.D. Bean Eagles. That's Leon, the bat boy's son, Jimmy. And the next one is Jimmy's daughter, Carrie, who scored 1,000 points at Franklin Pierce University and is in our Hall of Fame. He also had Kim and Tracy, who were great athletes, and it was a lot of fun to hang out with that family. In the 1950s, things started to shift from baseball to softball. There's a few of the WW Cross tack shop teams here. Softball was safer. It offered more opportunities for players, maybe not of the greatest abilities, but I'm not saying these players didn't have abilities, but it just meant that more people could play. And the next notable thing was that the local sponsors recognized that with all these teams and adding softball teams to the local region, if you put their name on their shirt, they were proud to put the trophy of the tournament that they won over the weekend in the front window or on the mantle top or whatever. So the local the sponsors really did want their name on the shirt, and the better the team, they would fight for it. I also stuck that Ringe uniform in there, which is over on the door over there. That's just such a complete uniform that must have been murder to play on a day like today, a hot summer day, with sliding breeches and wool socks, and God, it just you'd lose some weight on a double header for sure. Next one is some more local yokels, is some of the same fellows that are in other pictures as well, including Leon Hunt in the front here. Okay. Now, this happens to be my oldest single item. It's a horsehide baseball, which is on this table here, from the 1870s. It would be considered the dead ball era. It had the soft core, so you really had to wallop it to get any distance, or let alone a home run. They, in conjunction with a 43-ounce piece of hickory, one of the two-tone bats over there, it was an effort to swing and connect. That's probably why there was only one home run in that 101 game there, too. I found this baseball. I swiped this baseball while crawling under a barn in Merrimack, New Hampshire. I was wiring this barn, and literally it was army crawling through hay chafe under this barn, pulling a wire to hand it to my friend in this hay barn so he could pull it and I could staple the wire back. Along the outside wall was a clump of newspaper that, not particularly smart, I hit with a stick a couple of times there, and the dust was flying, and this ball was wrapped up in those newspapers. Thankfully, it wasn't a rat's nest or a mice or whatever, but that ball rolled out in amazing condition. So it went home with me. I can live with that. I earned it. The next is, there's 5 softballs in this picture, 5 different sizes actually. The 2 middle ones are indoor softballs that had to have been played for these long New England winters. They would play in the gyms as well. These very soft. So you can imagine they played right down the road at the Ernie Pratt Gymnasium here at Conant High School. And for that matter, one of the 2 uniforms, one uniform is Leon Hunt, the other is Ernie Pratt's uniform. So, let's see. And I go to the next one of the bats, and I mentioned the bats already, but the hickory and some of the other species of woods they're no longer available. They've depleted so many different types of woods. They have hickory. People have tried virtually every single variety of wood, and they continue to deplete. They're into northern Canada right now trying to find beech and a variety of different things. There's one bat I know, Owen, and I know Jed Brummer loves this story. There's a blonde bat on that table that this group of fellows showed up at a tournament at Franklin Pierce one day, and he gave me this bat, and he was a Ukrainian bat maker. I came to find out that where he made his bats was dangerously close to Chernobyl. So probably a Geiger counter would probably react to that. The business went out of business because they couldn't keep the lathes running because there was so much shrapnel from the 1,000-year wars that have gone on in that part of the world that they kept hitting metal in these trees. And so that's why I stuck that one bat in there too. So next one is, we're getting into the equipment now here. The spitter's mask, that gave the catcher an opportunity to get even with a batter you didn't particularly care for. You could spit your tobacco on his shoes or his leg or whatever. I like to think that it was just so that you could communicate properly with the umpire. Like, that was a terrible call. That was so. And the shin guards are wooden reed, which very similar, but not to cricket equipment. This actually was baseball related. Okay. Next up is a field liner. This came from the town of Temple. This was kind of fun when I moved into town. They kept an apple box with a couple of mitts, a baseball, a bag of lime, this field liner where they'd put lime in the hole and roll it down the base lines to get ready for a game. But they stored it in the crypt in between the two cemeteries where the ball field is in Temple. And I know you know where it is. Our local undertaker, if you don't know. But there it sat for available for the teams to play, and people religiously would put it all back in the box and put it back in the crypt. It sort of gives a new idea to the dead ball era too. I mean, I never thought of that until when I was doing this. Next up are these. I think anybody that's played here local has played on straw-filled bases. They were either tacked down with a spike or not. If they weren't, then they would shift under your feet, leaving you either ripe for a sprained ankle or a ass over tea kettle moment. But undoubtedly there'd be a puff of smoke when you rounded the base from those bases. Okay. Now we're into the evolution of some of the equipment. New Hampshire had a really unique advantage over the rest of the country. In Plymouth, New Hampshire, we had a manufacturer, the Draper and Maynard Corporation. Draper and Maynard had the patent for the very first baseball mitt. So they promoted it. They at one point 80% of the major leaguers had Draper and Maynard mitts. And in New England alone, they had amazing companies out of Boston, Brine Company, Spalding, so much more equipment than the rest of the country had, and we had our choice of really beautiful equipment. Okay, some of these items you could barely put a baseball in them. They would barely hold the ball. They're closer to a winter glove. I guess we're up to 25, aren't we? Something like that. Pockets and the webs were starting to be formed. You'll see that one little graduated heel, that half moon on there. That's so it wouldn't roll up your arm. If you fielded it properly, it would stop right at that point. Okay, and then more and more pockets were being formed. This is a catcher and a first baseman's mitt, which looked very much alike. One had a little more flexibility than the other, but you clearly had to use two hands for the first 30 some odd years of this game. You had to use two hands for sure. That's why I think you should take every single shortstop from the dead ball era and put them in the Hall of Fame with their fielding percentages should be 1,000% for what they had to deal with. Okay. Now you'll notice that in the 30s and 40s and 50s, the webs are getting better, the fingers are getting fatter, it's getting safer and safer to play, and this kind of equates with the softball changeover in the 50s. So this is an oddity. Not many teams could afford something like this. This is an ambidextrous glove. So that would have been a treasured item in that apple box in Temple to have an ambidextrous glove, but there it is. And the mitts just kept getting bigger and bigger. The first baseman upright one was a U.S. Navy first baseman's mitt for World War II. Now, I mentioned the Draper and Maynard sporting good company became famous for a lot of reasons. In 1914, the entire Boston Red Sox team traveled by train up to Plymouth, including this rather portly rookie pitcher who had his lefty deerskin model mitt made for him. And while he and the rest of the team were on Main Street checking Plymouth out, the young boy came up with a mitt in his hand and asked for an autograph. And Babe Ruth said to the kid, you're one of those lucky dogs. You have one of those mitts, a lucky dog mitt. And a marketer said, bingo, there's the brand names for our new line of baseball equipment. So Babe Ruth coined the phrase, the lucky dog brand, and that was their brand right into the major leagues. So thank Babe Ruth for that. All right, stays this. I snuck this picture in here just because it cracked me up. My Aunt Isabel lived in New York City, as I did at one point. She worked for Rand Company. They made maps, Rand McNally and such. And this big galoot center back row crashed their company picnic. And I'm not sure if he was looking for hot dogs or beer or pretty girls or all three. So, and that's him inspiring George Bush Sr., who played at Yale. Now we get into my most important, and this research project has taken me from coast to coast. This research project I started in the early 90s, sort of by accident, but curious to find out more about the 1946 Nashua Dodgers. I'd heard stories, I'd heard about a couple of Negro players having played in Nashua, but I didn't know quite the importance that it had held until I started digging. Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, this tremendous experiment of his to put the first black man in white professional baseball, sent his scout Clyde Soothforth, who ironically played for the Nashua Millionaires in the 1920s, was sent out to find a host of potential ball players. They settled on Jackie, not just for his ability, but for his temperament, because as we all know now, we know the story pretty well, that it was not an easy road for Jackie or any of the early Negroes in early baseball. In that same time period, the 2-week time period, they signed two other players, Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb. Okay. Now these two fellows right here, when they decided they were going to send 3 players, Roy Campanella, if you can back up one, Stace. I just want to point out these fellows here. They wanted to send all 3 to Danville, Illinois, and Danville, Illinois said, absolutely not, we'll close the league down, we won't play a single game the entire year. So they had to kind of scramble. They sent Jackie to Montreal to play his minor league ball, and then they sent Campanella and Newcomb to a Class B affiliate in Nashua, New Hampshire. So technically we broke the color barrier in New Hampshire, so something to be proud of. Neither deserved to be at the Class B level. The next one will have a little list of the teams that were in that New England League: the Nashua Dodgers, the Lynn Red Sox, of which they would brawl, the Portland Gulls, the Providence Chiefs, the Fall River Indians, and then later they added the Lawrence Millionaires and the Pawtucket Slaters. Imagine Nashua, 35,000 people in Nashua at that time, and fewer than 50 were black. Don Newcomb was a 19-year-old, 6'4" pitcher from Newark, New Jersey. Campanella was 24, from Philadelphia, a 9-year veteran of the Negro Leagues already. He'd been a pro since he was 14 and had traveled through Central America into South America, and again, neither one had any business being in Class B. So in Nashua, tip of the hat to Nashua as well. They really did show no prejudice. There was a very high concentration of French Canadian, of which they were immigrants as well. So they accepted them. I think their biggest concern was, can they play? Can he pitch? Can he hit? the important questions of fielding a team. But they really showed no prejudice, even to the point where the mayor of that era in the late 40s owned a car dealership in Nashua and would loan them cars so they could go home and visit their families in Philadelphia and in Newark. There was a poultry farmer that I'm sure all of you driving to Nashua all those years remember, that poultry farm on the left-hand side of the road, pretty much where Applebee's is now. His name was Jack Fulgren, and he offered 100 baby chicks for every home run hit. Roy Campanella had 13 home runs, and he sent home 1,300 chicks to his dad, who started a tremendous poultry business in Philadelphia, so it was a nice side business. Okay. These two fellas were the best of friends and roommates, and Don Newcomb told me that, he said, I really can't call it prejudice, but they sure didn't know how to cut a black man's hair, so we just had our heads shaved every year. So the two of them said our hats were loose. The next one, this is Roy Campanella, that little fire plug that he was, and those are the tools of ignorance, of which I'm part of as well. The next picture is the pitching staff of that 1946 team that had really a wonderful camaraderie. They all bonded, they lived together, they ate together, and that's, what can I say? They ate together. That's just an amazing thing in the 1940s, where these poor guys had to go to back doors for hotels and restaurants to be fed. Women would bake, would bake pies for these fellows, and it really was a treat to play. They had nothing but wonderful memories of Nashua. Excuse me. Okay, now this is the whole team. The general manager was a fellow by the name of Buzzy Bavasi, who is, if you're a Dodger fan, he's certainly a recognizable name in that organization. He was a legend. And they were managed by Walter Alston, who also played on occasion, played first base on occasion. Walt Alston went on to coach the Dodgers, I believe, 26 consecutive years, signing one-year contracts because he didn't want to get ahead of himself. He says, I want to prove myself every year. So in addition to Jackie Robinson's storied career, Don Newcomb and Roy Campanella had some amazing accomplishments themselves. Don Newcomb won the very first Cy Young Award. He won the Rookie of the Year and the league's MVP. Campanella won 3 MVP awards, 51, 53, and 55, until he was paralyzed in an automobile accident in 1958. Also Don Newcomb and Jackie had their careers interrupted with military service. So I took my research of all this information and pictures from the Sporting News, from the microfiche of the Nashua Telegraph, from family and friends, and I first was approached by Fritz Weatherby to do a half-hour television show for New Hampshire Chronicle, of which we did, which turned out, I think, extremely well. He did it all in that, is it sepia chrome or whatever it is, to make it look like it's old film footage. And he told the story of them breaking the color barrier in Nashua. Well, I took that, what do you call those tapes now? I can't even think of the tapes. I took that tape and my research and got an audience with the mayor of Nashua and said, this is a no-lose situation for a political machine here. How do you not improve on race relations by getting Don Newcomb and or the family, because at this point Roy Campanella had passed, his family back and honor these people while they're still alive. He said, "This is a great idea. What are you going to do next?" I said, "Well, I've given you the research. Now the resources are yours." So they did, in conjunction with Daniel Webster College, bring Don Newcomb and Roxy Newcomb and their families back to Nashua. They gave them the key to the city. They gave Don Newcomb an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters, and they renamed the streets around Holman Stadium where they played Newcomb and Campanella Avenues. So that was an amazing moment to have him come back at that point. This research project keeps going. It's one of these stories. It's got a Jaffrey connection too. Family here in Jaffrey, Don and Cindy Burgess owned a factory, Precision Forms, of who I worked for a while. And around this time, when we had honored Don Newcomb and such, I'd communicated with him quite a bit. The Burgesses had a factory in the city of Commerce, California, and I was going out to install some equipment, and I called Don Newcomb up and said, "Can I meet up with you?" He said, "Sure." He says, how about Tuesday?" I said, "Whatever, I'm yours." Well, he says, "You can't golf with me, but you can have dinner with me at the Roy Campanella Celebrity Golf Tournament at the Riviera Country Club in Brentwood, California." And at the time, that was O.J. Simpson's country club, and made phone calls from there, and it was in the news, so it was intense, to put it mildly. So there I show up like a dub and sit at a table at a dinner with Steve Yeager, Mike Sosha, Reggie Smith, Ralph Branca, with Vince Scully sitting behind me. Bruce Jenner is over here, and this person's over here. I knew all these actors and ball players. Sam Jethro, first black player in Boston. My head was spinning, to put it mildly. So that was a moment that I'll never forget. As a matter of fact, I called my wife and said, "You will not believe what just went down." And she said, "You won't believe it's 4 o'clock in the morning." So I had no idea. So when they brought Newcomb and Campy's family back, Nesson did a TV show trying to catch up with the history of the team and everything. And they contacted me and came to my home in Greenfield, and with a camera crew, and I was on this show called Front Row for Nesson, and again, I thought, how cool is this story? It just keeps going. About a year later, I got a phone call from the same reporter who came to my house from Nesson, and he said, "Do you still have your catcher's equipment?" I said, "Matter of fact, I do. The antique stuff?" He goes, "No, current stuff." "What are you talking about?" He says, "It's not a Nesson project, it's an ESPN magazine project. We did not get a catcher. We need a catcher to catch Randy Johnson for a photo shoot." And if you don't know Randy Johnson, he is a 6'10" flamethrower who, while striding towards home plate, you do not see his arm until it's picking your nose, basically. He is terrifying, actually. So I had to scramble to find the essentials, a cup. That was first. And thanks to Beaver Jutras, he helped me with a couple of things too, so we got it all together. I went down to Boston. I met him at Fenway Park. We drove to a factory in Boston Harbor, went on a rooftop in this factory. They had platforms set up on plywood and such, and 4 or 5 different photographers with umbrellas, the whole 9 yards. I was more concerned about not hitting the photographers in the head on my return throws, but I caught about 60 or 70 balls from Randy Johnson. The very first throw, he kind of gives me this creak and then threw it about 10 feet over my head out into the street. And then I crossed myself and said, he's 6'10", throws 105 miles an hour, and he's wild. So, but that was the last wild pitch he threw. So every other one right in my mitt, and it sounded like a fuse was being lit. It hissed. And I have not caught a baseball since. I have not thrown and had a catch with a baseball since. Okay, Stace, that's that one. Now, I stumbled into this story, having worked at Franklin Pierce for 23, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. I had a student helper, a Brazilian soccer player, who asks me, did they ever ski on this hill behind the shop here like that? And I know Owen Houghton's right here, who was on the, I think he was in charge of the ski club at Franklin Pierce at that time. So I said, you bet they did. I can pull up a video on YouTube and show you the first 50 years. And sure enough, here they come scooting down the hill and making jumps and looking good. But the next video had President Frank DiPietro putting a sash over the head of this very good-looking white-haired black man. In 1969, Jackie Robinson received an honorary degree from Franklin Pierce College. I was excited and also furious with the school for not telling me that, having lectured the baseball and American culture class there, Jerry, thank you, and other events that were underappreciated, and I ran with it. We wrote a letter to the Keene Sentinel the day Jackie came to town and such. So that must have been quite a host of people on that stage, because not only was Jackie Robinson receiving a degree, let me back up, his actual acceptance speech read almost like a Martin Luther King delivery, a sermon. People sat basically with their mouths open and heard him speak, and they were just in awe of his composure, what he went through, what black people of that generation were going through. It inspired an entire generation of graduates from Franklin Pierce, and that's an amazing moment. But on that same docket was F. Lee Bailey, Dr. Joyce Brothers, and Al Capp. He was Little Abner or whatever. I think he was the cartoonist. So, okay. I'm not done researching yet. I just want to sneak this in here. There's a couple of pictures over there of it. I stumbled in this talking to the Winchester Historical Society. They showed me this picture of this player. In one picture, it says his name is Dave Thornton. But there is a player by the name of Bill Thompson who lived right in their neighborhood in Brattleboro that would play up and down the Connecticut River Valley under the name Bill Thompson, who used to play under assumed names. Now, this is from 1904 to 1910. This predates any African American playing in the state of New Hampshire. So I'm not done getting to the bottom of this. He also played for the Cuban Giants, which was a traveling barnstorming team that went across New Hampshire, just destroying town teams all the way across. Even the big teams, the Concord, Nashua, Keene, the scores were outrageous. They weren't Cuban at all. They were hotel workers from Trenton, New Jersey, who faked Spanish. They would talk gibberish. So, and I think that's where I will kind of end. And I do want to thank you so much for coming. There's not too many people I don't know in this room right now, and I thank you all for coming. It's got to be a question or two here. A lot of my former teammates there, I have other pictures of you, but I've sworn I'd never show them. So, no, I've had so much fun playing ball with some of the players here, and New Hampshire's a very small state in that sense that you can go to Concord and run into somebody you know, and you can go to wherever. I even knew the hot dog vendor from softball, Dominic Danucci, remember Dom? At Fenway. Hey, Robbie, how you doing? I'll have a sausage and pepper, please. Thank you. So it is that kind of an area, something that I really appreciate, and which is why I stayed in New Hampshire for 50 years, because it has one of everything instead of 1,000 of everything like the inner cities do. So this was a really great place to settle and raise a family, and you all have made me stay. So, yes?
Hey, so Rob, you talked about Don Newcomb a lot.
I do.
Know his stats. But obviously he was pre-DH. He was a good hitter.
Oh, he's a great hitter. He DH'd. Somewhere I have there's a picture of him. There is a batting stance of him that lists an outrageous batting average. Oh, he was a great hitter, and they would actually, the Dodgers, even in Brooklyn, would pinch hit him in situations too. So he was legit. He's a big monster. But all those guys, imagine, like Campanella, he said this is kind of easy. It was his comment that this is kind of easy, because he was similar to Yogi Berra, where Yogi Berra was known as one of the best bad ball hitters of all time. And there was very little that you could throw by Roy Campanella without him swinging the ball over his head or on the ground or whatever. He'd be swinging anyway, and usually making contact. So it would drive pitchers crazy to think you have them fooled and they'll line a ball to center field after you just bounced it in front of them. So, yes, any other thoughts? Yes.
Nice to meet you. Rob and I played softball in Temple, and I've got to say, he hit a home run once. It's the only time, it was a tournament, there were probably 200 people around the field, and it was all anybody could do to hit the base of the pine trees in left field. He hit a ball 2/3 the way up these huge pine trees, and I swear to God, it was still rise. The 200 people were quiet as a mouse until you touched first base. Nobody could believe it. It's still fun.
It's the only hit I ever stood at home plate and went, whoa, whoa.
And I asked you about the Sinatra's in my brain. I saw the bottle caps over there.
Right.
Wow, I remember this from 67, 68 in New York, Tom Siegel. And you had a little story there.
We were, my neighborhood were very clever little bandits. He's talking about the bottle caps that are over in the corner that had pictures of I had Yankees and Mets, and then up here they had the Red Sox. They also had football, Jets and Giants and Patriots. We were clever enough to they had outside Coke machines. Every gas station had them. They'd pop the top, their cap would go into the jar, and we'd be right behind them with a string with a magnet pulling those caps right back out. And so we amassed, what a collection we had. We had, everyone in the neighborhood had one of everything. So that was our big thing.
You you're
So-
familiar with the local baseball.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, have the guys in Jaffrey always been the biggest cheaters in the league?
He's questioning the Jaffrey integrity. Have they always cheated? I can vouch for a few years and a few games, yeah, but competitive would be the word I'm using tonight. Boy, they are. They are so competitive, and it's just fun to watch because they just would give you 100%. I mean, it's no wonder why high school basketball teams win year after year, and it's a sense of pride and little pockets of pride too. You get 5 or 6 athletes come together on one team, and then it's contagious. It's infectious. So the teams usually do well. So yeah, there's a couple of coaches with a couple of championships in here too, which is great, which is wonderful. Any other thoughts? I do want you to mill around and look at some of these things. It may stimulate a question or two, but it's just been a fun hobby. A lot of people collected cards and stuff. I think I collect stories as much as anything. That's sort of what has inspired me over the years. And every item that I've showed you on the screen tonight has a sub-story, like the Temple Town team that had a farmer from West Wilton by the name of Dick Greeley. I found out through his kids that he had nothing left from that town. He had no pictures, no nothing. So I made a copy of that picture, and he was sitting on his tractor, half on his field, and I walked out with a copy of that, his team picture, and all I could think of him saying, who is this fool walking through the cow manure with a piece of paper in his hand? Is he a bill collector or whatever? But he was moved when I gave him a copy of a picture of himself in a Temple uniform. So, and then I had to go wash my shoes. So, but all of these things generally have a story and a meaning behind them. And I just, again, thank you very much for having me.
Don't go anywhere. Okay. Well, as is our tradition, we don't quite have Major League Baseball salary levels here, but we are very happy to give Rob a half gallon of New Hampshire maple syrup for speaking with us tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much. So please join us across the way for a reception. It'll be nice and cool in there. We've got something cold to drink for you. Next week, we have Annette Poland joining us, who was a lifelong friend of Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and, in fact, painted her portrait. So she'll be with us next week, and hope you will be too. Thank you.
Good job. Thanks.